Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside Now. I'm Brett West, along with Rodney West and Charlie Platt. We will be talking professional wrestling, probably not the modern era. Because Charlie, I'm pretty sure you do not watch any wrestling today.
I'm like one of the hosts of this program, the one that just said the last thing. I don't give a rat's rear end about what they're doing today. I still live in the past, boys. I live in the past and proud of it.
I do not watch it. I do occasionally watch something. I did watch Edge have a great match with. Now I don't remember who the guy was, but whoever he worked
Finn Balor.
Finn Balor that had a great match, but then it just went downhill after that. And I told Rodney, I said, now if you smell something stinking, that is the match that they're having in wherever they were at Montreal.
I believe it was the Elimination Chamber
Yes.
match with the U.S. title. I think the one you were talking about.
You know, you guys grew up in the business and really didn't get the full dose of old school because y'all are too young for that, believe it or not. And I'm the old fart in this group tonight. So let's just lay it out. To me, we lost. Of course, everybody goes to think the old school people like us say, well, Vince did this and Vince did that, and Vince is the reason he smartened everybody up, and that's where we lost the magic. To me, this is gonna be corny, and I want you two to comment on this, and if any of the audience wants to join in. To me, the magic was lost when it got to the point that the boys, heels and baby faces, shared the same dressing room. And they would sit there on the benches and go over every move they were going to make in the match. For the folks watching that don't understand, these young men, hell, y'all not young, these two goofs you see doing the program every week grew up in this business. I think everybody knows that, but you guys got to see the magic of, I'm gonna come down to redneck terms here, the Houston County Farm Center in Dothan, Alabama, where you had separate dressing rooms. You carried a finish from the baby face to the heel. All you carried them was the last few moves of the match to let the opponent know what the finish was going to be. The magic, my friends, was the ability of that heel to go out there with that baby face and call that match. Not necessarily just to make each other look good, which they did, but to play a psychology game with the 4 or 5 thousand people at a sold out house in Dothan. It was a magic that cannot be compared. The business today, unfortunately, cannot be compared to it. I mean, you probably got people with earphones in their ears. That, I know they say Vince does it. Yeah, tell everybody what to do. Back then, you had to have talent to be in the business. I don't mean seeing how high you can come off of a rope and not kill yourself or kill somebody. But I'm talking about working that audience and getting them to the point of wanting to come in that ring and then cooling it down, get the heat back up again, and have fans literally pulling their own hair out because you had brought them into a frenzy and you had not planned it. You know, back in those days, I always had people, and you guys did too. Oh, they rehearse everything they do. Back in the territory days, they did not rehearse everything they did.
They didn't have time. They're
No,
making trips, working 6, 7 days a week, nine
driving two,
times in a week. So no, they didn't have time for
driving
that.
driving 200 miles a day to a shot or more, and they didn't. It was get in there, the heel, unless it was um, a special situation. The general rule in the business was the heel called the match.
Right.
But there were stipulations where it didn't happen. The babyface would call the match, or they would work the match together. But it just knowing that they do what they do, it took the magic away when everybody started going over stuff, and that's when I
It
really started losing interest in the business.
it was too rehearsed, and the spontaneity was gone.
Exactly, exactly.
You could almost, and even today you can call almost verbatim what they're going to do. And you can always add a leg slap or four or five through the match as well, which I hate leg slaps. We were talking about that the other day. But also, I think one of the worst things that ever happened is the loss of the local TV shows in the markets, such as the one
Oh
we did
yeah,
in Dothan. I think that once you took and standardized the show by sending or bicycling tapes all over the place, I think that was some of the beginning of the end myself,
it
because you
was.
can you could see. I mean, you could see in Georgia when they took the tape out of, they used to do 4 productions a week in Georgia at one time, and then all of a sudden, they were took took over Chattanooga, and then they started going up north, and then they eliminated all those local shows, Columbus, Macon, and even the one that they were doing and sending the TBS thing, which people had already seen the week before, to the local market. And I think that's what killed the ratings off, as far as I'm concerned.
You're exact, Rodney. You hit it right there. And here's a point I want to make. I was I've been blessed by the good Lord to have a good life. At age 67, I look back and look at the things I've been able to do, and it's been an interesting run in broadcasting, and the wrestling, of course, was part of it. And I grew up in an era. I just said 67 years old, so do the math. In the mid to late 60s, in Enterprise, Alabama, where I grew up, we were able, without cable, hey, that rhymes. I might turn into a Virgil Runnels for this thing's over with. Ah, yeah, if you will. We were able to watch without cable with just an outdoor antenna. As a kid growing up in the early teens, I could watch Hope You're Up and at 'em Real Soon, Fred Ward out of Columbus, Georgia on Channel 9.
Mhm.
I could watch one of my mentors, Gordon Soley, out of Tampa, Florida on Championship Wrestling from Florida off of Channel 6, Tallahassee, Thomasville. And then Gulf Coast Championship Wrestling, by gosh, live at 4:30 on Saturday afternoon on Channel 4. Now you think about that. Look at the talent that Georgia had, even during the war. See, I remember the war before I was in the business because Ann got some TV time, bought in TV time. So at one time, we could see Florida Championship Wrestling, Georgia Championship Wrestling, All Star, whatever the name of that thing was, and Gulf Coast all in one day.
And then if you
With
want to go to the show that night in Dothan or
Well, no, no, no,
wherever.
no. Back then, Rodney, the Dothan was a unique thing. TV was Saturday. The house show was the next Friday night.
Okay. That's right.
You got that?
Yeah.
And those days, instead of New Brockton being a spot show on Saturday night, it was, but before New Brockton, it was Quincy, Florida, which is within a good rifle shot of Tallahassee. So you think about those days, you could go to Tallahassee. If you're around the Quincy area, you go to Tallahassee and watch all the Florida talent down there. You could run up the road to Thomasville, Georgia, and see probably once a month spot show, Georgia Championship Wrestling. Or you could go to the old pavilion, farm pavilion in Quincy, Florida on Saturday night, and they'd shoot a hot angle. every week off of Dothan TV. Gulf Coast would. Rocky McGuire, they would shoot an angle, and they'd go off with Don Carson saying, Dick Dunn, Friday night at the Farm Center, I'm going to get you, but tonight in Quincy, yeah, tonight in Quincy. And they get the spot in for Quincy, and they get the spot in for Thursday night, Panama City. My gosh, you could go to wrestling 5 nights a week and see talent that was the best in the world. Now think about it.
Yeah, that
That was before you.
I explained one night. I was we were on here, and I was trying to send a message to our younger people who watch the program that we're not saying that we're not trying to knock your product that you believe in today. We understand that's what you grew up with. We're just saying you're missing out on what used to be. Used to, you didn't have to just watch the TV on the watch the show on TV. You could go out and participate in the show. You could be in the show go to the show every week somewhere and be a
Yeah,
part of it, not just to watch it on TV. It was more a part of the culture at that time when you had, like you were talking about.
yeah, a lot of people they need that education, Rodney, to know what it was all about, and a lot of people even get it wrong from time to time. Here's something I saw on Facebook the other day. Somebody commented, and no, it was a post about the arm wrestling competition between Andre and Hogan, which we did on Dothan TV. It's readily available for you to watch on YouTube.
Right.
And a lot of people talk about that and they say, well, that was the big build up to that big match in Dothan. No, we had sold out the night before on Friday night in Dothan. And there was 2,000, according to the fire marshal, there were 2,000 people, 1,500 to 2,000 outside that could not get in. They broke one of the front windows out of the farm center, people trying to get in to see Andre against Hogan. So for some reason, Andre, it was a deal. If I remember things correctly, what he was supposed to leave Saturday morning flying out, but something happened with his dates for Saturday, and they had an open date. So Louis Tilley was doing the booking, and so I can hear Vince now, Senior. Would you like to have Andre again? Hell yeah!
Sure.
We just set a record last night that probably Miami, Florida couldn't beat. Yeah. So the arm wrestling gimmick was to promote New Brockton that night. We sold out the Farm Center in Dothan Friday night with a match, and the next night sold out with the same match 40 miles away in New Brockton, Alabama.
And you wonder
Now,
how many people from Dothan actually went there, especially when they
well,
get able to see it, you know?
Dothan, I might have somebody come through no, they can't get in my gate. Uh, Dothan was not the supporter of Gulf Coast, Southeastern, or Continental Wrestling. Not to say there's not some great wrestling fans that were regulars every week, but when you said Wrestling Farm Center Dothan, you're talking about 50 miles over in Georgia, people came. You're talking about the panhandle of Florida, and you're talking about all the way up to Troy and even Montgomery. And they would come to Dothan to watch the big matches. And a lot of people would never believe what I'm about to say. Big matches in Dothan. Now I'm doing this for an education for these West boys because they were not around when all this was going on.
No.
When I first got in the business, you know who the hot tag team was here?
No.
One of the hot tag teams, the Poffas, Randy and Lanny, managed by their daddy Angelo Poffa. That's 1976 Gulf Coast Wrestling. Also, right before that, Jack Briscoe wrestled Terry Funk to see who was going to face Harley Race for the belt. Later on, we had a match, this other Gulf Coast, where Terry Funk wrestled Dusty Rhodes to see who got the world title shot. That's big stuff, guys, for a little town like Dothan, Alabama. And I'll go to my grave saying that Dothan per capita, this market for wrestling, was the greatest in the United States of America, bar none. I've looked back at Florida Championship Wrestling numbers, and you can look on their. Barry does a great job with that Facebook page on Championship Wrestling from Florida. But sometimes they'll put the matches from all the different years and the different towns. And if you'll look, a lot of times they would put Miami's numbers down there. Dothan, Alabama was sometimes drawing 2 times the number of fans a week that Miami was, and Florida Championship Wrestling was all the rage. They outdrew Tampa. I mean, it's amazing what took place, and to set the stage for everything is the same in the wrestling business. I mentioned the first part of our conversation about watching Georgia Championship Wrestling from Florida, and Gulf Coast when I was, in my teen years growing up. If you look at the rotation of the talent, Gulf Coast had Bobby Shane. Florida had Bobby Shane. Now we're talking foreign to a lot of people watching this program, but what I'm telling you is the best of the best of the best worked our market down here. And we've talked about this before. To be successful in this market, you had to be able to wrestle, to really work a match and give people something they could sink their teeth in. Here goes my redneck philosophy. A lot of times, Florida had talent like New York that was nothing but big brutes, and I'll call, so don't, not knocking anybody, but your Ox Bakers, your Abdullah the Butchers, the people like that, they didn't draw any money here. People wanted to see action and wrestling, and they wanted something, a product in the ring that they could sink their teeth in. And I think all the years that your dad and I were involved uh, in the Southeastern and the Continental, I don't think there was ever a night that went by that even the biggest skeptic sitting in the audience didn't, on their way out the door or when they got home, say, oh, by gosh, that Rodney West, he got his butt kicked tonight. I saw him. He knocked the fool out of him. You don't see that anymore. That's why I don't watch it.
It's really
Brent,
bad. It's really bad.
when you have to do, bam.
Oh, that is. I watched. Before we come on, I always fast forward through the show, and even fast forwarding through the show, I saw Edge and Austin Theory calling spots. Now, what? What in the world? You could see them 5 miles off on the floor. Both of them were doing it, and I couldn't. I just think, don't you? I thought you were supposed to go through this before you got out there, and maybe they messed it up and had to catch up or something. But yeah, you could see them do it just as plain as day. What?
Charlie, what would have happened if someone in the territory days would have been caught calling out spots? What would have happened to those guys?
Ooh, the only spots I heard, I'll tell you a funny one. And this goes back to the territory days too. I mean, I was never a big Dusty fan. I mean, Dusty was the most talented on the mic of anybody you would ever see. But I bought into the gimmick for a while, but then it just, it got old. But the funniest thing that ever happened, I think, to me, was I was announcing and doing the timekeeping of a match the night he was in Dothan against Terry Funk. And y'all, I got so tickled, I had to bite the end of my tongue off. The audience couldn't hear it, but I could hear what was going on in the ring. And Funk got Dusty in some head scissors. And they worked that dadgum head scissors probably 10 minutes. And back then, you could take one hole, folks, and work it and get 5 to 10 minutes out of something and not even move. It was called rest period, recess. And here I am at the ring, and the crowds are hollering and everything, and I heard Terry, Virgil, Virgil, I think I got a fart. Here's got Dusty in the head says, Virgil, those guys, they could put on a show. I mean, give them 4 square feet and they could do something that would make you believe it. They were two greats. And like I said, I never was much of a Dusty fan for in-ring work. I was more of and Dusty could work, but it was usually the same spots over and over and over. And you knew when you went and paid your money just about what you were going to see and just about what one of 5 or 6 finishes would be. But it's the two of you and me, and I got to work with some of the most talented individuals in the world that could go out, do anywhere from 10 minutes to 1 hour in a building that was sometimes 104 degrees, no air conditioning in the summertime, and keep a group of people interested and on their feet for an hour and never sit down. Uh, those days will never happen again. I I think we're losing so many every day of the old school, and I think it would be small of us not to say condolences to the Jarrett family because Jerry Jarrett, that's another facet we can talk about. Every town was different. Every territory was somewhat different in the style. Memphis was a rough house, hang 'em on TV, and I mean literally sometimes as we did at Continental, hang 'em on TV and do some stuff. But it was it was just the ultimate territory to work when you had to work but a couple 3 towns and make a paycheck. Jerry Jarrett was a genius. He really was. And a good man, good businessman, and he will be missed. So to Jeff and all the family, we certainly send our best tonight, and our thoughts and prayers are with you.
You were talking about Bobby Shane, and for those people who don't know who Bobby Shane is, right there he is, Bobby Shane. Now there was a time he was the boy wonder, and he looked completely different than this. Bobby Shane, but this was during his King days, I believe. I have a note somewhere.
You know what I read yesterday about Bobby that I did not know, and I'm assuming this is true story. I didn't know the link with Lawler. Did you?
Yeah, that he gave him his crown
and told him to take care of it, and then the plane crash, and that's how Jerry became the King Lawler.
And here is probably the crown he gave him.
Exactly. But he would work Florida and would work probably loser leave town deals, and we'd get him up here in Gulf Coast for like some pretty good long runs. In fact, he was small in stature, but was one heck of a worker and was just a heat magnet. He'd walk out there and they'd literally try to kill him when he came out of the dressing room. Yeah, I mean, he was that good.
You know, I've said WWE has bought all the territory tapes. They very rarely put anything on there. You can't. They're pretty much if they continue doing what they're doing, they're going to strangle out any history of wrestling because they're going to own it all. And so there's
Yeah,
going to be no video left. I've tried to contact them and try to say, listen, let us tell the story of the territories. And they I guess they have some plans for it. But if you go to the Peacock Network, there's really not much there. Maybe 50 shows out of the territories that were around for 20 years. So I don't know what they even have. Georgia Championship Wrestling. They don't even show it.
out of all, I'm gonna be the host here for a few minutes. Out of all the territories that you guys lived in and worked in with your father, what was your favorite territory, Rodney?
Oh boy. You know, well, and it's not a slight on anybody, but it was Georgia. That's because that's where we spent our most of our time. That's
Right.
where we were raised in. It was Georgia, and as I said I was on with Brian Young earlier this week where I did a show with him, and it broke my heart when I saw them going to Columbus, Ohio, and the day that they changed the name from Georgia Championship Wrestling to World Championship Wrestling, just it was never the same. It was absolutely never
Hmm.
the same. And when you're growing up dreaming that will be the place you're going to work, and then when you finally get to where you're able to work, it's not there anymore. It's gone.
Yeah.
But that was my favorite, really.
Yeah,
Your favorite?
Georgia mine too.
Okay.
Because we was there for almost 11 years. So, that was a long time to, you got
And
to.
everything and it's not getting on a slide on anybody, but everywhere we go, we always compared it to Georgia Championship Wrestling, no matter where we
Right.
went. Even we go to the Carolinas. Well, it needs to be more like Georgia Championship Wrestling, and it's not true because, like you were saying, every market's different, every territory is different, every place had its different style, and just because something gets over in Memphis, Tennessee, doesn't necessarily it's going to get over in Atlanta, and we know that for a fact.
This
But go ahead.
this territory and Georgia, the workers were more real than in a lot of the other territories.
Yes.
One thing that always bothered me, and this is everybody's got their own style, and I don't want anybody to say you're just a cruel old bitter person. But one of the things that always bothered me the most with the workers, with the boys in the ring, was oversell.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
and here's a guy.
Give an example. Let's give an example of that.
All right. Well, we're
Okay.
talking to Memphis. We were talking Memphis wrestling there for a moment. And one of my best friends in the business that would oversell was a guy named Jimmy Burhead Jones and Jimmy Valiant. It must have been a Jimmy deal. But you see, you sell something, but don't oversell it. Because if you go over a certain thing, over a certain limit, you're further smartening everybody in the audience up. This is bull crap. Hey, nobody can act like that. And even some of the big guys in the business would oversell from time to time. Uh, I just, I guess I was one that wanted the business to be the world of kayfabe and it be protected. And when you see that happen, you just kind of, did y'all ever
Oh,
witness these?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was one of my main issues with a person that we don't talk about much on the show, Kevin Sullivan.
oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Kevin
I saw him take a drop kick in the middle of the ring and run and jump over the top rope. Okay. This I mean, we're in Carrollton, Georgia. And I'm watching it. I said, did he just jump over the top rope? He said, yes, he sure did. And it was not even the momentum wouldn't even have carried him back. I mean, he just took a drop kick, turned, ran, and jumped over the rope. It was the most awful thing I'd ever seen.
Well, you know, Bill Dunn, when he was booking Mid-South Wrestling, he was going against Hans Schroeder, a guy named Hans Schroeder. And Bill's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time.
Oh, yeah.
But he oversold stuff for Hans Schroeder, and it made Hans look horrible because the match looked bad. And it's because Bill was trying to make him look like he was a superhero type person, and everything he did looked bad. And he was overselling poor old Hans Schroeder.
There was a lot. You look back at it now, you know, some of the things that even some world champions did.
Sure. Yes. I know
The man, you know, I saw something on Facebook. He was working with Hawk. Hawk pushes him off. He does that roll over and flip over a final time. 3 times in a row. Once was good.
Yeah.
Second was, but by the 3rd time you do it, yeah, you got your point over now, boys. But things like that for some of us, and even some of the guys that worked, was I heard a story the other day, and Andre was always in this territory, was the only kind of odd thing that would draw big money. Andre was always going to draw. Super individual, and he would do anything if he liked you. He would do anything you wanted to do in the ring. And had him in 1979, or maybe the first part of 80, somewhere in that. It was somewhere in the time period close to the Hogan days. Louis Tulay was still booking, and had Andre against Harley for the world title at the big building, Municipal Auditorium, Mobile. Great business. I mean, it might not have been a sellout, but it's probably 8,000 people, you know, 9,000 in the building, which, god dang, big boys today draw that. They just faint, you know. But here's what happened. Harley called for the spot on Suplex and Slam. So long before there was a Hulk Hogan, this no muscled up man by the name of Harley Race, the toughest guy that ever stepped in a wrestling ring anywhere on the face of this earth, or ever got in a bar fight in any beer joint on this earth, picked him up, pulled him over, picked him up, body slammed the giant. And in Mobile, Alabama, Andre never drew big money again.
Oh.
Think about it. You got the ultimate 7'4" guy, and a guy that actually in the ring hardly looked half his size.
Yep.
And then I heard Flair tell the story about the same spot. And Flair was on the same show. They did the same suplex slam. He said he got back to the dressing room. Harley was back there puffing on that Marlboro cigarette. He said, Harley, did you talk to the giant about that? The world champion don't ask for anything. I said, big guy, suplex, slam, kick out on 2.
What a great impression. That was perfect.
But I mean, if you knew Harley, that was Harley. I mean, If you're Andre the Giant, you scared a Harley race. I think that's what I'm trying to say. You you did what that listed. Might not be every world champion, but that world champion, if he called a spot, you did it because you trusted him, and he was the greatest of all time.
And
And
that,
Vince
if not,
McMahon
that's
Sr. was having a heart attack in New York. What did you
Yeah,
do?
down here in the South, we're throwing the giant over top ropes, suplexing him, slamming him, and he's the eighth wonder of the world. Whoa! And that's not, folks. That's not to take away from Andre, because these two guys and I had relationships with Andre that we dealt with him, and we know that if he was just drinking beer, there was never a kinder hearted person to deal with. But if he was drinking hard liquor, get as far away from him as you could because there could be problems.
You know,
that's
we've told the story. I think we've told the story where for some reason, the ring truck was broke down in Georgia, and that's usually Charlie McGowan would pick up Andre and I think Charlie might have cut his finger off. That's the reason he didn't go pick him up, and we had to go pick him up, and we picked him up in a Firebird. Now, can you imagine Andre the Giant having to get into that Firebird? But he did get in it, and he couldn't even turn around because he just said, "Hello." He couldn't even move in that car. And I'm wondering, why didn't they get somebody? Why didn't Dad borrow a car from somebody and pick him up and not in a Firebird? Well, we're sitting
One night, we had him in Montgomery one night, and he had to catch a red eye flight after the Montgomery show. This was during the week, and he was going to like Los Angeles. And they put him on third, and I got him in I had a van at the time, and he stayed in the back of the customized van. He hadn't had, when he flew in, he hadn't had anything to eat. So, or he probably eaten, he needed a snack to get, I had to get him to the Atlanta airport, straight up I-85. The nearest thing to the Montgomery Civic Center was a Crystal. And, and Andre said, "Stop here." Get in there. 35 Crystal hamburgers and 6 or 7 large orders of fries. And there was a case of Miller High Life beer iced down in the ice chest in the back of the van. We made it to LaGrange before we had to make a beer stop.
need a refill there.
that is what I was trying to tell WWE. If they don't start telling the stories, there's not going to be no way
No,
the territory stories, and they own all the rights to every television program that was going on, and they don't use it. It just saddens me. It just saddens
well,
me.
except the stories that people like you and me and those still alive, the Fullers and different people know that happened that never made it to tape that they could buy. You know, we have we lived a crazy life and we dealt with some crazy people, but we also dealt with some of what the old term salt of the earth people. We dealt with a lot of them that it would surprise a lot of the fans who the best was to deal with and the best was to have as a friend. Comment on that, Brent.
Oh yeah, there were many guys that you would when you saw the guy on TV, you would think, oh man, everybody gives Ole Anderson a bad rep, but we never
Oh,
we
y'all
never
worked with, yeah, you never had a problem with it.
no, we never had a problem with him. He was always good to us. Rodney, who would you say?
Oh, well, I mean, we had good, good relationship with Dick Murdoch.
Yeah.
Never, there was not a nicer person that's ever been.
Yeah.
I mean, and you talk about stories. Those were some good stories. Who's riding with us? Well, Dick Murdoch's riding with us. Oh, well, okay. He would have
Yeah.
you laughing, going, and coming too.
Now, was he
Uh,
working Gulf Coast as Ron Carson when you were?
Yes, sir. That was Don's brother, Ronnie Carson. Don and Ron, the Carson brothers. Yes, sir. Uh, somebody said who was my favorite wrestler to work with. I mean, if any of the old crew is watching, don't take this wrong. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Bob Armstrong, because he and I developed a friendship that, and Ron and I did too, that has tested the test of time. But the last 10 years Bob was alive, we probably didn't go 3 or 4 days without talking to each other on the phone. He he told some people I was the younger brother that he never had, and it was a very special. eh, You know, I still have his and Gail's phone number in my phone. I refuse to take it out.
yeah.
The night, the day after the night that my mother passed away, somebody called. I didn't call Bob, but somebody called and told him what was going on. And Bob himself was dying with cancer at the time. And it was right before Gail passed away. He was going through, he had a wife that was stricken with Alzheimer's and was not doing good. He was battling cancer. And I didn't catch the phone call. There's about a 45-second message on my phone. I'll never, ever, ever erase that message. It's it was a special relationship that just two friends had. And I never had a cross word with him. And all the TVs and I never had a cross word with anybody in the old Southeastern crew. Now, when it got to Continental, it was a little bit different because, toward the end, we went through several different bookers and several different things that uh, the three of us probably didn't like. But it was what the business was. In fact, I've I've looked back on some stuff on YouTube and did not realize who all we had in the final 2 years of Continental Wrestling. Scott Hall.
Right.
Said, what? Not the Scott Hall that was at WWE. Yes, he was just a green rookie when we had him. Green. Diamond Dallas Page, Brian Lee, all these different guys, the Rockers, all these different folks that went on and worked with Vince or WCW, the old Georgia Championship Wrestling. Rodney, that's just for you.
Thank you.
We had we had them here before anybody else had them, and I tell people that it's what? No, I remember watching that. No, we had them before anybody else did, and the talent roster that rotated from Georgia to Florida to Southeastern. Georgia, Florida, Southeastern. Maybe go out and work for Bill Watts 6 months. Maybe go to Japan for 6 months. There was I would say, the 50 greatest of all time. We're dating back into some things that a lot of you folks will never be able to see because there's not any video of it. It just don't exist. You got to understand, we didn't have cell phones until, you know,
Till the
1980s.
yeah, yeah.
All this stuff that was lost, the 50, I'll say 50 greatest wrestlers of all time, just about did a circuit between Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and the Gulf Coast of Northwest Florida, Oklahoma, and the two Tennessee territories.
Yep. You can make a
Rotate 'em around.
30-year career out of wrestling back then and just work the territories.
There you go. You could live, and what really, some of the problems that occurred in this territory was the fact nobody wanted to leave.
That's right. They
Yep.
started
You know,
homesteading. That's right.
if you went up there and worked for Nick, you'd starve to death. Down here was always pretty good pay.
Yep.
From the southeastern days was pretty doggone good pay, and the longest trip you had was from Pensacola to Birmingham.
Yep.
Some of the trips, Pensacola to Mobile, most everybody lived in Pensacola. Pensacola to Mobile was 35, 40 minutes. Dothan was 2 hours and 15 minutes. It just, Montgomery was what, 2 hours, 2.5 hours?
Yep.
And you could, in the summertime, the guys could stay on the beach till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, then go to work.
Yep.
And still make a pretty good living. I've read several books that some of the guys that we worked with wrote. Arn Anderson said, "Great payday down here." This is where he got his real first little push.
Right.
Yep.
Uh,
Right.
and your dad was part of it. It just it didn't get any better than this area when it came to professional wrestling. And I have people all the time invite me to some of the independent shows, and I wish these folks well. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just afraid if I go, I'm gonna get embarrassed.
It's hard. You're exactly right. It is hard.
That's a hard statement to make, but I just feel
It's
like, Rodney,
well,
I would be embarrassed.
well. I tell them, I've been invited to them as well, and I said I would love nothing more, really. If I knew when I got there, I wouldn't last 5 minutes and have to turn around and leave. I said, I'd rather just say no. And then you'll be mad at me because I left in the first 5 minutes because we went to one show it was up in Athens. And we walked into the place and they had watched WWE and the first 30 minutes of the shows or 20 minutes of the shows talk. Well, that's how they started this show. I was waiting for the matches to get started. The owner was actually in the ring and he was setting up the match. 5 minutes went by, still no wrestling. Me, Dad, and Tommy Weathers. You remember Tommy Weathers? We're all sitting there. We're up there sitting watching. 10 minutes goes by. And still, there hasn't been. He's still in the ring. He's still talking. And then another guy comes out. 15 minutes has gone by. And there's still no wrestling. At the 20-minute mark, I looked at Dad. I said, we're out of here. I'm not staying for not one more second of this talk. I said, it might have been entertaining to you and the 5 other people that's in there that paid, but this is not entertaining to me. I wanted to see somebody. I want to see a bell ring. I want to see the lock-in.
I went to a town and I didn't even make it. I didn't even make it until they started selling tickets. I saw the guys walk in and I seen all of them and I'm thinking, does any of these people go to a gym? I know they may be bright. I'm not even staying and watching this. This is not even going to be something I'm staying and watch.
The last show I watched was here in Dothan, and it was our last reunion show that we had, which I guess about a year ago, a little somewhere. I think. Well, we're coming up on 4th of July. It was the 4th of July weekend last year, and fortunate enough to have guys that could work. And even had some of the older guys work. And the older guys that worked could still work. And you know who fascinated me out of all of them, of the old guys that worked? I mean, a lot of the guys in the 50 to 60-year-old age group still could get out there and go pretty doggone good. And they were working with some of the younger people that was obviously listening to how to go through this deal. But you know who, to me, stole the show? 80-year-old Tony Atlas.
Oh, wow.
I stayed to watch that match, and I said, I just hope he don't get hurt. My God. He went out there, locked up, hip toss, hip toss, hip toss, back and forth, and had everybody in that little building going crazy. I mean, and there was some great workers that were there that night. Uh, it was a lot of fun to watch. That was a group of younger people that could relate to what we grew up with. Evidently, they had some training that way, and they were working with some very very good guys. That I don't think Tom Pritchard worked that night, but Tom was there. Uh, Wendell Cooley worked, and there was a bunch of them that could still go pretty doggone good. And uh, there's a time though you need to step away from it. But Tony Atlas at age 80 still looked fantastic. I didn't know until the night before we had a little eating thing for everybody. He could sing as good as he could. He's a heck of a vocal singer. He sang the national anthem. We're sitting there, and all of a sudden, this booming voice starts singing the national anthem. And there's Wendell and some others standing up. Tony singing the national anthem.
He's a
Found
great
that
artist
little.
as well.
Do what?
He's a great artist as well. Have you ever seen any of these
Oh
clips?
yeah, talent. I just very talented individual. Well, like I said, we worked with some not only interesting but very very talented people.
Charlie,
Uh,
you were talking about Arn Anderson earlier, and
yeah,
let's be honest. When he first got to Southeastern, let's just say he was Super Olympia. We called him Super Zero because that's what we thought he was. But honestly, the moment that he teamed with Jerry Stubbs, something clicked. There was something over. Not was it just my impression, or just my impression was that teaming with Jerry Stubbs was the turning point for Arn Anderson.
he had a teacher and he played the part of the pupil that learned well. How's that?
Yeah, I
I
would
mean,
put.
Jerry, there again, there's one that because of the mask and back and forth, a lot of people don't. He gets lost in a shuffle there. But one of the most talented ring veterans, technicians that has ever been. You put and during this time period you're talking about, Arn not only had the influence of Jerry as his partner and mentor, he was working with the likes of Brad Armstrong. Oh, that guy, he couldn't wrestle worth anything, could he? I mean, think about the talent that was here at one time. If Arn didn't get good, he was the sorriest thing that ever came along because he had some people down here that could teach him, and he obviously listened and learned well. And by the time Flair came to the what?
I don't think nobody said nothing.
Oh,
I think we had an echo or something.
okay. By the time Flair came in and saw Arn and what he had become, that was,
I
Flair just thought he was the hottest thing in the world.
Yeah.
I have to. Yeah, to me, no better team than Arn Anderson and Jerry Stubbs.
No,
They were a top rate team, and I believe that if it wasn't for the fact that Jerry had the sickness, the illness that came over him, I think he would have been a superstar. I really do. Um, but I remember that. I remember Dad saying, "I want you to watch Arn Anderson and Jerry Stubbs tonight." we were going to, was it Biola Battery? He said, I want you all to take close attention to Arn Anderson, Jerry Stubbs. You're going to see something tonight. And he was right. This was not
them, wasn't he?
Who?
Sonny King was the manager of them.
Yes.
Am I correct?
To start with, yes, you are correct. Frankie the Thumper Lancaster was the other guy I wanted to mention that worked the night of that reunion show. He and Wendell worked as the tag team. Did great. I mean, didn't miss a lick at anything. But Sonny King, that was his second run in South. Well, now I take it back. The first time I worked with Sonny was in Gulf Coast. It was still Gulf Coast Wrestling. And he came in and worked and then really started managing while he was here working. And a lot of people won't understand who all from 1975, 76 till the end of the territory days, I dealt with bookers like Grizzly Smith. He was in here for a while. Several different great minds in the business came through here, and the talent roster. There's a side or two that gives who all has worked in Gulf Coast, Southeastern, Continental Wrestling in this area. And I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. It is unbelievable the talent, and a lot of the talent that was down under, a term that was not main event material, was actually main event material, because in the days of Southeastern, for a long time, your opening match might have been a Arn Anderson against Jerry Stubbs.
Yep.
It could have been a Brad Armstrong against name any heel. The roster was good from bottom to top and top to bottom. There was really no in between. And we rotated. You would go up the ladder, you would come down the ladder. You would go up the ladder, you go down the ladder. That was what I think I had a negative impression of Dusty through the years. Because once he got that book, it was Dusty, 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 Dusty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys, and I'm not throwing off on Virgil Runnels, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it was his way or the highway. You guys were part, and I'm gonna hit you with something you can relate to, and finally you'll say, dang, you're right. I had the morning TV show going. Turnbuckle was Dusty's promotion, and you guys worked with it. Your dad and you guys. I had the #1 morning show in this market. It was also like #2 in Albany. It was, and I'm very grateful it was successful. We offered, your dad and I did, Dusty, for not enough money to even make any difference. In fact, I offered to do some of it for nothing, to run some segments on my morning show 5 days a week, on the week and the week before he was coming in. And I'm not talking about just running commercials. I'm talking about running pre-taping the show before and actually doing angles. Nah, that ain't. Nobody's watching TV early in the morning. No, hell no.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then preaching to the choir. You're exactly right.
He was throwing talent in the ring here. I mean, Larry Zbyszko might mean something in Minneapolis. He might mean something in New York. But in Dothan, Alabama, he ain't nothing.
Yeah.
Not to be ugly to Larry Zbyszko.
Right.
It's just a fact of life. Nobody knew who he was down here. And what happened? That promotion went down the tubes after about 3 shows. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't want to put any effort into it at all. that would require him to have to be involved. He thought he could just come in, set up a ring, and in lots of cases, he didn't realize he was the only star on the show. And so,
Well, it was he and Dustin was working then, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't? Yeah.
Barry Windham.
Barry Windham was there. I remember that. But yeah, he didn't want to do any publicity. I mean, he just got to where no, I'm not doing any publicity. Well, Dusty, you're the only ones they want to talk to.
I had a deal set up for the RCB TV3, or Channel 9. It might have been Channel 9. And I had a deal set up in Chattanooga, and they were going to do the television program for free. They were going to tape it, the whole thing. All Dusty had to do, show up, talk with them. They would get all the sponsors. They'd give them a great TV time slot, and Dusty refused to come and talk with the people.
I think he no-showed the day of the meeting.
Yeah. So,
well, see, he no-showed down here while I was in Gulf Coast. He no-showed 2 times. That was between 76 and 78. 3 times he no-showed in Dothan. Two times in Dothan, 1 time in Ozark. That's what it was. It was 3 no-shows. And then Louis had him booked on the big outdoor blowout at the football stadium for the Hogan race deal. That was a all-star thing. And he was supposed to work with my all-time favorite, Austin Idol. But we knew a week out that he wasn't going to be there. So Louis brings in the Briscoe brothers, Jack and Jerry. And I was talking about this with somebody the other night, Ron. In fact, we're talking about the territory wars and what all went on. And I had told him the story that the night of that deal, there was heat in the dressing room. And I thought, I witnessed part of the heat between Louis and Jack Briscoe. At the time, I thought it was because he didn't want to substitute for Dusty. But the real thing was, I think he did not like working with Idol.
yeah.
Which
Shocker.
he would not have been the only one in the business to ever have that thought in his head.
So true.
This is true. Hey, I got a picture of Ron and Don Carson here when
Oh my gosh!
This is them. They're looking dapper there, aren't they?
You know, I tried to send you something that didn't send to your phone today, but I'm gonna get you a copy of it. It's something that was on Facebook, and I remember these days because, or this particular day, it was a 1968 all-night gospel sing in Panama City, Florida. And you know what the lineup included?
What?
The singing wrestlers, Don Carson and Dick Dunn. Newspaper ad. Oh, yeah. They recorded with the Florida Boys Quartet back in the day.
Oh, my goodness.
They were both, they were both very enthusiastic, great bass singers. In fact, before it became Southeastern, it was still Gulf Coast. One last hoorah. This is a true story if I ever told it. One last hoorah to try to draw $1 on the Gulf Coast. They put Dick Dunn and Don Carson against each other in New Brockton on a Saturday night. I had to be the driver of Dick Dunn and Don Carson, get them out of the building, get them in the same vehicle, Dick Dunn's Cadillac, and I drove them, one in the front seat and one laying down in the back seat, kayfabe, to an all-night sing in Ozark, Alabama. We went backstage. And some of you folks that know anything about Southern gospel, the Goodmans, the Hensons, and I forgot who, but the Hensons and the Florida Boys thought they were in royalty with royalty when Don and Dick get in the building, and they sing backstage with them. I mean that, but then we still were hiding things up until then. Very, very good. A guy put on Facebook the other night, and he's just a, there you go. He's just a loudmouth Democrat from down here that nobody. He said, well, and he's probably 80 years old. I'm 67. He said when he was a teenager, he was selling cokes in the stands at the farm center on Friday night. And he walked to the dressing room one night and saw everybody sitting together and wiping their fake blood. Well, I couldn't do anything but this. After all my years in the business, I never saw any fake blood. And I said, and to your point, in those days, if a baby face was caught with a heel anywhere, they were toast. And not only were they toast, sometimes some of the old shooters got a hold of them in a preliminary match and beat the bejesus out of them. Now,
Exactly right.
you know what? He never responded to that answer. I just don't understand why.
I just, you know,
I love it when people, don't y'all, when people say, oh, I saw them riding together. And they're talking about the days when they did not ride together. They didn't eat at the restaurant together. What would Bill Watts do?
true. Right.
He'd beat them
Right.
half to death and then fire them.
Yep. Well, I mean, we've told the story many times on this program where Ole drives up to the Richmond County Civic Center in Augusta. Main events Abdullah against Mark Lewin in the cage. Great Mephisto is Frankie Kane's the manager of Mark Lewin. He drives up, sees them sitting in the car together at the Richmond County Civic Center. He walks up to the car and fires all three of them at the same time and tells Charlie to take the cage back to Atlanta.
Whoa.
They don't play. Oh yeah. When last time I saw Ole, I said that was the greatest moment of my life when you fired all three of them. I wish you'd have got Kevin Sullivan while you was at it. I don't know why. I like Kevin. That's what he told me. I don't know why you'd want that. I like Kevin.
I have to say this: Ole wasn't in Carrollton, Georgia, when we seen the matches. He never went to Carrollton. So.
No, he was working a big town somewhere.
Or maybe not working anywhere at all. Let's get to the questions and stuff from the insiders so we make sure we get it. Richard Hood is with us. Don Hester said, hello, Charlie, welcome. We're not worthy.
What?
He said, hello, Charlie, welcome. We're not worthy.
I'm not worthy to be here, but I mean, I am. And look, thank you for any compliment that comes along. The fans deserve more than what they're getting today. And if me and you two coming on and Jack and anybody else that does podcasts makes you smile a little bit, we do something to make you smile or push a button that makes a good memory come to you, I think we have a purpose to do that. And I enjoy ever so often doing just exactly what we're doing tonight. And it takes me down memory lane on things that it's easy. As many shows as the three of us worked, not only together, but apart, there's no way we can remember everything. And a lot of times when we do little things like this, people say something, or you'll say something that makes me click, or I say something that make you guys click, and we'll remember things that we forgot a long time ago.
Yeah.
And at my age, forgetting ain't that hard to do, boys.
Kevin Penley, I can't put this up there because it won't come all off. Kevin Penley said, good evening. Charlie, one of my favorite commentators. My only question, why did Fuller go to Birmingham to tape because of Gordon? Was it because of Gordon? If they'd stayed in Dothan, would Charlie still have been on the program?
Probably so. Ron was trying. Everybody saw what Vince by '85 was trying to do. It was doing, and the theory was go to the big buildings, the big production, made everything on the same level as Vince, which is true. It did, and but it didn't work out. Vince had the upper hand on everybody. He uh, he won the war, and a lot of people. It was a move to try to compete. And Ron actually had a meeting with CBS. Ron came that close to beating Vince and having national network television.
Yeah,
There's a lot of what ifs and what if this had happened, what if that happened. As far as me is concerned, at that time, uh, I was a single parent raising a 2.5-year-old child. It was not likely that I would pull up and had roots here in broadcasting. There was no way I would have left with a child and even running up there for production. And later on, things, were the same. The Brantley got older and I remarried. And that's when I came back in latter part of '87 or '88 and worked with Continental until the end. But there was no hard feelings on anybody's part. Uh, I will say this: Dothan went down business wise. Everything pretty much changed with that move to Birmingham. Birmingham got on fire again. It had been on fire years before that. Uh, but it really caught fire when they moved the production to Birmingham. Thus, what Professor Professor Rodney said earlier in the show. The TVs going away were the start of the end of the wrestling business. The TVs meaning that localization of the TV studio, which is a very intimate atmosphere. I mean, you had a big room with 100 people, two commentators, a wrestling ring, a set, and the wrestlers. That's all, and two cameras. That's all you needed. You would start telling the story there, finish the story in the building of that town. And even the tape bicycling, Brent, I think worked for Southeastern probably better than any other territory because we took a little extra time with it.
yeah,
A lot of the other territories would have the bicycle tapes. In other words, we taped in Dothan on Saturday. The next week, that tape would go to Montgomery, Birmingham, Mobile, Huntsville, Florence. What was up in Tennessee? What are all the different markets that would go into with customized interviews for those towns? And a lot of the territories would only do like a couple of 2-minute inserts for their local shows.
yep.
We would actually do 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and 3 minutes. Plus, we would a lot of times customize that 5 to 6 minute personality profile in the middle
That's right.
Yeah.
to customize Spotlight Montgomery, Spotlight whatever. And I think that's where we were ahead of the game with a lot of the territories and why the towns drew better down here than they did in, say, some other territories where they just, do a quick insert and that was it. We made it feel like, even though most of the people watching all over the territory knew that the production was in Dothan, Alabama, the Channel 4 studios, we would make it feel like we were in their town and part of their community. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that is what's missing, and that's what started missing when
Yeah.
they did it. George Lambert is with us. Ben Masters for some of you folks. Hello, my friends. It's good to see you, Charlie. Robert
Is
Grimes.
that funny hat wearing guy that
Yeah,
wears that funny look? Okay, that's I thought. George, good to hear from you, my friend.
good to see the Godfather of Wrestling tonight from Robert Grice. Matt Jennings said, in my opinion, there was no better heel in my life than Bullet Bob Armstrong.
Hey, I agree. I got the slap that proved it, by gosh. Bob did not realize, and I think if the truth were known, if he were alive, and I could put a hot coal to him to tell the truth, he would say the most fun he ever had, some of the best time fun he had until it got a little too hot for him, was playing the part of the heel. And he'd never done it before. That's the only time in the history and his long run in professional wrestling that he was a heel. And
And
he did it well.
oh, he was so good at it.
Well, when you slap your son, you slap me, you know, you make a national celebrity out of somebody named Fanny Titweiler, you are going to get some heat somewhere.
It was great stuff. I mean, I only got to watch it years later on video.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. My open heart surgery is a product of little too active lifestyle. I mean, getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning, doing early morning TV, early morning radio, running with the wrestling crowd, all the stuff that I did. And I thought about this today. If they had high definition cameras back in those days, oh, buddy, we would have been the biggest heels would have been yours truly and Gordon Soley because we both were just about chain smokers, right? Y'all remember some of
Yeah,
this. We stood over
yeah.
there during the matches. Gordon and I'd be smoking. All of a sudden, the match would be over with. We'd be putting out cigarette butts, everything else. If they'd had high definition television, all you would have seen was smoke coming up from
Coming up.
behind the set. And Bob was the same way, bless his heart. I quit the day they rolled me into the medical center, the 15th of May, 2012. I threw my last Marlboro cigarette out the passenger window of my Jeep as my son drove me, and the two people that were there with a gurney waiting for me and watching were my cardiologist and an emergency room doctor. That was the last time I smoked a Marlboro cigarette. Bob never quit. He,
Oh,
he all the way up, and bless his heart, he tried several times to quit, but he struggled with it like I did. Of course, he never had the open heart surgery. I think he would have quit had he had that. But what a life he lived to be 80 years old and see what he saw and watch his kids develop and into great stars, all of them. And what a love story he and Gail had. I keep going back to it, but I miss so much calling that number before they went to assisted living and still were living there in Gulf Breeze and had the house phone. It was a pretty much a 75% chance that Gail was going to answer the phone. And I still hear that voice, Pat, it's Charlie. Wake up. Charlie, he's taking a nap, but I know he wants to talk to you. Oh, God. Don't wake the old bear from sleep. But it was always good times, never a crossword. And two of the uh, friendliest people
Yep.
that God ever put on this earth. Yeah, that year, 2020, was kind of the kickoff of COVID. And that year, I lost so many great friends and family. Uh, you guys probably do slightly remember a lady that worked at Channel 4 named Ann Varnum, had the morning show there for years and years. Ann passed away at age 80. That started it. My mother passed away. Mother was about to be 97. Great long life. Then Ann's husband, Jerome, a good friend, 80, passed away. And then about that time, Red Holland passed away of COVID. Red was 80. Were y'all getting these numbers from me? Are you
Yeah.
listening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About 2 months later, Gail James, known to wrestling fans as Gail Armstrong, passed away. Gail was 80. And then in November, we lost Bob, age 80, about to be 81.
Wow. Wow.
2020, boys, was not a good year when it came. And these are people I worked with. This is my mother, and I worked with the rest of them. And it was when you look back and reflect on that. Yeah, all the ones I named had good long lives, and they were blessed. But we never know what tomorrow might bring us.
No.
Right.
And with this, I feel I need to say this, and we'll go on with some more stories. But this is Heart Awareness Month. Uh, your life changes when they saw you across here, pop you open, take that heart out, pop it on a table, and start working on it. I mean, your emotion changes. A lot of things kind of, and it opens your eyes as to how precious life is, and enjoy every day our good Lord gives you, because you never know when your number's going to come up, and you need to be ready when it does. If you look at the situation going on in this world, you really need to be ready.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah,
Matt said, "Love Charlie. He's my favorite announcer. Him and Rick were magic." Was it talking about Rick Stewart? Don Hester. Charlie is awesome. Michael is with us. He says, "Good evening, everyone." Michael Barr is with us as well. If it were not for Charlie, as one of the best commentators and playing the calls in the ring, wrestling here in Southeast would not have been what it was back in the territory days.
thank you. I
And then,
don't agree with that, but I agree. The boys, the workers, were the magic. My job was just to talk about the magic that they made and try to put it over in a manner. And a lot of people say, "You never got really excited." I did, but I didn't, because I go back to what I said earlier in the show. I never liked oversell of our product. And sometimes announcers tend to scream and holler, "Oh my God!" ah," all this bull crap that just proves the point that this is a sham. Why is he trying to make me believe that? It's not. That's why I kind of always took the laid back approach to it. And a lot of that was due to Gordon. You know, uh, Gordon gave me some good advice when I first started, when I was going to get Southeastern kind of as the main person. He wasn't in here for Southeastern, but maybe 8 or 10 weeks, and then it was kind of dumped on me. And he said, "Always remember." He said, "I learned this years ago, Charlie." I said, "What?" He said, "Always remember that if you're having a problem making a point, getting across, and that camera scares you, just look into that camera as not a camera, but look into it as someone you can communicate with well, whether it be your mother, your father, a girlfriend, a wife, whoever it is, your best friend. Talk to that person, not to the camera. And that always stuck with me as some pretty doggone good advice.
And that's exactly what you did. That's exactly how you did it. It
Well,
was like you were having a conversation with whoever was watching. Gordon was having a conversation with that one person. You think you're talking just directly to them. That's talent right there. And you
well,
followed it right. I mean, it was perfect.
I just never liked the oversell part. I really that always. In fact, Rick was great. Don't get me wrong, and I enjoy working with Rick Stewart. But sometimes I'd want to say, you know, back off here, hold it, let's call the dogs off for a minute
And you
because
not and your ability to communicate like you were also gave credibility to what was going on.
that's what I wanted to do, Rodney. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to. I, I saw a question that came from how did I get involved? How did I break into the business? It was by default. Bob Howell was doing the main part of he, along with John Goss and the late Al Roberts, who was sports director at Channel 4, were doing Gulf Coast Wrestling. And Bob took a job as the anchor of Channel 12 WSFA in Montgomery. He was he was the anchor at Channel 4 and news director. And when he did that, he said, Charlie said, Rocky and them gonna need somebody to announce at the farm center on Friday nights. So he introduced me to Rocky McGuire. I started out by just doing the Friday night and Saturday night ring announcing, and then it worked into start ring announcing on TV. And within just a very short period of time, I ended up with on the main microphone. So it was that was in 75 or 76, somewhere along there. Those so I got to see, boys, a lot of talent come through here through the years.
Dennis Mitchell says, "Hi, Charlie. Do you have any good stories when Scott McGee and Sonny King were there with Southeastern Wrestling?"
Gosh. Well, has Sonny passed away?
I believe he. Maybe not.
I
Maybe
don't know.
not. I don't. Maybe he has not.
Well, I bet some of this stuff I better keep, even though the statute of limitations has run out, so to speak.
I believe he might be in McCall, Louisiana. I honestly believe that's where he was from. I believe
He played a very bad joke one time on a couple of guys. That was back in the Gulf Coast days. That was not during the Scott era. That was Gulf Coast days. He kind of doctored up some fruit for somebody, and they passed out after consumption, shall we say? And that,
I always liked
Don't
Sonny.
ever. I learned Dad always told us, hey, if anybody in the back gives you something to eat, don't eat it.
well, if Sonny King offered you fruit, they said, do not touch it. Don't even contact with it.
Let's see.
Ah,
I'll say also when Eddie Mansfield exposed the business, what was your and Ron Fuller, Bob Armstrong, I guess your opinion of that, of what Eddie Mansfield did?
I can't speak for them, but for me, I always liked Eddie Mansfield about as much as I liked Austin Idol.
He said, "What was your reaction when Pez Watley's son? I think didn't Paul Heyman slap him or Eddie Gilbert?"
No, Eddie Gilbert slapped him.
Yeah,
That was one of those deals where Eddie and I had a few words about that, but and Eddie, and I had to understand Eddie, and Eddie had to understand me, and we finally came to kind of the happy medium. He came out of that Memphis group that did stuff like that every Saturday morning live on TV. I mean, that was part of the Memphis culture. That might be why Memphis is what it is today. I don't know, but I think about that for a while. But
Yeah.
that's what they did. They were just wide open, down your throat, slap kids around, pile drive your grandmother, whatever, to make a
Slap
buck.
Tommy Rich's mama. Yeah, whatever. Yeah,
Yeah, slap
you're
Tommy
exactly right.
Rich's mom of
And
all
and and
people.
like we
World.
s- and like we said, just because it that worked in Memphis doesn't mean that works in Dothan, Alabama. I mean,
Exactly. And like I said, I was always the one that kind of wanted to be as straight laced as we could be and let the product sell itself. But if I needed to guide it some way, I would. And Eddie did some wild things. It did draw some money, but that quick hot shot was not what this territory was used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hot shotted it from time to time, but we always told a long story leading up to the big bang that brought the Bucks in. Does that make sense?
Yep.
yes, yeah,
In the
it's
case of
built.
some of the things that Eddie did, Eddie was a great mind in the business, and it was a great, hey, for his size, I'd put him in the top tier of workers. He was great, and he knew what he was doing, but he grew up in Memphis. His dad, Tommy, eh, and that's what they did. That's all he ever saw. But that down here was not the popular thing maybe to do. Yeah, it would draw money for a week or two, then it was over.
Yeah.
Down here, you needed to lay the deal with Bob Armstrong and I, and his when he was a heel, the slap he gave me. We built that thing up 8 or 9 weeks before it ever occurred. I mean, week after week, little bitty things, and then we'd take it a little bit further and a little bit further. And he and I would argue, got to where I didn't want to be around him. I'd walk off the set. We didn't do the quick boom. We built it up to where people said, these guys really have a problem with one another. And that's what makes an angle work, is to build it to a point. And now, do they even have angles anymore? I don't know. I don't watch.
Yeah, it's every week. If you haven't seen one, if you'll just wait long enough, they'll have a contract signing, and that should be coming up next week. In case you
Oh,
missed it, yeah, we have a
okay.
they have a contract signing at least every other week, and it always ends up with a fight, the tables flying, and yeah.
This was told to me by Dick Dunn and Don Carson both. We were sitting around my house reminiscing of in the mid 90s, maybe 96, 97. Don came in from San Antonio and was visiting with Dick, and they were both on my TV show that morning. Then we sat down. We I listened to those two reminisce. They hadn't been together in years, and they talked about all the old days at the Houston County Farm Center, and it was something like 10 or 11 weeks in a row. They sold out the Farm Center. They were on top, main event every Friday night. Every Friday night. Dick Dunn pinned Don Carson in the center of the ring. 1, 2, 3. And all it took was Don Carson on TV the next day. Judge Ghost, I beat him like a dog last night at the Farm Center. A 3-minute interview, and they'd sell it out again. And it happened week after week after week. And nothing was ever, no wild thing was ever shown on TV. And the most impressive thing I remember as a child watching, it comes time that Don turns babyface. I forgot who had turned on him, and Dick Dunn was the only person that Don thought could help him beat. maybe it was the Hines brothers or the Monroe brothers. Take your pick. Legends in the South back in the day. It was one of those two heel teams, and Don comes on there, and Dick Dunn, no, no, I will not be his partner, not be his partner. And then Don comes and says, Dick Dunn, you know I have world championship bird dogs, which he did. Don Carson was known for world championship bird dogs. Fact of life. He said, if you'll just be my partner, I'm going to give you such and such a bird dog. And if I don't treat you right, you could have all my bird dogs. Hey, once he gave up the bird dogs, he was the biggest baby face in all of Gulf Coast history. Hey, just little short stories like that, but bring them off a period of time,
Sure.
and they worked. And today, it used to be good versus evil. Then it got to be gray area. Now I don't know what color it is. Is there such a thing as a heel and a baby face anymore? Just asking.
No.
I can't.
Because I don't know.
When I watch it, I cannot tell if there is a heel or baby face. I don't know the difference of them anymore. They all wrestle the same.
The only thing that they have done in the last, I don't know, probably, well, since I've been watching it, and it's been 3 years or so, it is the bloodline with Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn's the only thing they have built like the way you're talking about, and it's paid off in with Sami Zayn, I think, and that's the only thing that I have seen in years that they've even come close to in the last, I don't know, 10 years at least.
That's somebody else that made a big impression on Gulf Coast and Southeastern. It's two different sets of characters.
Mhm.
In Gulf Coast, they were the Islanders. In Southeastern, they were Alpha and Sika, the Samoans.
That's right. I saw them. I saw them, and they. I never even knew it even had it, but there was a show that Lou Thesz had in Nashville. He was running opposition apparently to Nick Goulas, and he had the Islanders on the show with Saul Weingroff.
Yeah,
So yeah, and then I also saw them when I was going through and watching some stuff from Big Time Wrestling Chic Show from Detroit, and there they were, the Islanders. After the
I
sequence.
think they were in here as the Samoans there, and
There's
is
gonna
that
be
the Monroe brother? It is Rocket and Flash Monroe,
and I
not to be
just got all
confused,
kinds of stuff here.
not to be confused with another Monroe. That yeah, you got to give him some credit for changing the wrestling world.
Yeah.
He uh, he actually integrated the wrestling business.
Yep.
It started in Memphis, so I'm told, and that was a heck of a for the day. That was something that you can't hardly believe happened like that.
They're supposedly going to make a movie on Spud Monroe and
They should.
what he did in professional wrestling too, especially in Memphis. That's the talk right now. But they're also supposed to be doing one on Gorgeous George as well. So I don't. They are doing one on the Von Erichs. That is actually being done right now.
Really?
Yeah, it's called the Claw. I think it's called the Iron, maybe the Iron Claw, and I think it's supposed to come out sometime in the maybe the fall of this year. That will be an interesting thing. All right, now let's. Matt said Charlie during the TV episode with the sheep herders got their flag torn. Was it planned or did it just happen in the moment?
Oh, I think it was planned. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I wouldn't think they'd want them just to do that in the spur of the moment. Hey man, that's the only flag I have. How am I going to?
Yeah,
How am I going to work my gimmick tonight? My goodness gracious!
can't do it anymore.
Richard has said, Charlie, that was all South wrestling and Gunkles wrestling. And so,
All South, yeah.
Dad actually was working for Ann. He was working before he went to Georgia Championship Wrestling. He was one of the few that did not go to the other side there when they left. Did the Macho Man versus Steamboat WrestleMania 3 match, was that, I believe Randy Savage did go through that match with Ricky Steamboat over and over again, and praised as one of the best ever influence of how wrestlers built their matches. It could have been the beginning of it.
What was that again?
Randy Savage did the Macho Man versus Ricky Steamboat WrestleMania 3 match that was scripted move for move and praised as one of the best ever, having influence on how wrestlers built their matches. Possible.
Probably. He was I never, like I said, the only time I was around Randy would have been when he was Randy Papa, working with his brother, the Paffas, in Gulf Coast Championship Wrestling, 1976. Their dad, Angelo, was the manager, and they were green as gourds. We're talking 1976. But I heard, talking with people who went on and worked on up the ladder in New York in later days, say 80s, 90s time period, that he was just very, very picky about things like that and wanted every little detail gone over. And this person that told me that, I won't go over who that was, but they said it just made them so mad they couldn't see straight, because he wanted to go over it again, go over it again, go over it again. And this person, like the old style that we talked about first of the program, heel calls the match. You call the match in the ring, not in the dressing room.
Yeah. That had to drive Ricky Steamboat nuts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Somebody like Steamboat. Yeah. Could you imagine somebody like David Schultz getting that kind of a treatment?
That would have never happened. I'm sorry to say, Randy Savage match would have lasted about 3 minutes,
if that long.
Welcome, great professor, guest professor Charlie Platt. Dr. Phil Grass is the ones that dubbed us as the professors of wrestling. Evidently, he doesn't know many people. That's what I was thinking.
Let me tell you about Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil Bow lives within 3-mile buzzard flying distance of my house. We are that close together. He is a fine Christian man who is somewhat of a minister in numbers of ways. His father was Robert Grice, who was just one of the greatest men of God you will ever meet. Now, Dr. Philbo is a psychologist, counselor, and he gets crapped on a lot. Let's go back to what I said. He's 3 miles buzzard flight from my house. Bless his heart. Listen, Dr. Phil is like the Dr. Phil. He lives in a 3-story mansion here in Kent City, Alabama. Hey, Rodney, not a laughing matter. He really does. And I said gets crapped on. And I think, Bo, I've done you some good on that. There's some buzzards that were roosting on the top of his house. And you know what happens if a buzzard is roosting on the top of your house? It craps on the top of your house. Therefore, Bo gets crapped on quite a bit. But we kind of thinned those protected species birds out here lately.
Michael Barr said it was when you were on shows on Saturday in the late 70s days. It made a draw on Saturday night, the TV shows. He's talking about the TV shows, all the TV shows that were done for each territory, which I think did hurt the wrestling business. I could listen to Charlie. Let's see. I could listen to Charlie for days. I love this stuff from Brian Turner. Let's see. Kevin Penley. If you took away the super kick, broken tables and dives, what would wrestlers today have left?
Walking to the ring. Take their music away, they won't work. You can forget it.
Let's see. Michael Barr said, while in the Army Reserve stationed in Troy, Alabama, back before I went full-time in the Army, we went to the local Continental Championship wrestling shows wherever they were. Richard Hood. Charlie, I used to hear he put something on him tonight. Not for sure. What that means.
Oh, it depends on what we were. That was something we were talking about earlier, probably.
What was we talking about?
That's been almost 2 hours ago.
Not for sure. Richard, you might have to explain that one because we don't know.
Remind us what you were talking about there.
That might have been a reference to Don Carson. Y'all remember? Were y'all down here when he did the Big C thing with the peanut butter, the glove with peanut butter?
No.
He wore a black glove and called the glove peanut butter. And he would talk about, I laid something on him tonight. That might have been a Don Carson. It might not have been, but Carson was one of the greatest heels ever in the business.
When he came to Atlanta, they didn't let him do what he needed to do when he came to Georgia. When he
was managing, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. They did. I don't know who was booking at the time, but they held him back on what he would have done down here. I'll put it to that way. He was managing Archie, I think, in Atlanta. We're talking about Mongolian Stomper.
Yeah.
Which there, look at the.
I just don't. Why did he
go back to Florida? Archie was on top in Florida, on top in Canada, Tennessee, Alabama, everywhere Archie went, but he didn't go. He was kind of like somewhat like Bob Armstrong. He could stay at home and make a pretty daggum good living. Yeah. And if you could do that, you better know you were talented. And there's very few that could do that for the number of years that they did. And Memphis had some. This territory had several. And point I was making earlier, it was hard to get folks to leave this territory. You saw a couple of 3 different Titans opposition pop up against Southeastern for people that were not being used, and they wanted to work. And none of the opposition ever took hold, but they did try. And a lot of good talent went over to that opposition for certain shows, for a few shows, and it just, back in those days, without a TV, it goes back to what Rodney said. When we lost the local TV touch, business started kind of turning around in a different direction. But opposition could not survive with no TV.
No. Richard Hood said, I didn't care about what was going on in other territories. Georgia was on his mind. Richard Hood. Kevin Penley, well, I think he already announced that. Kevin, he said Bob Armstrong, which is the same here. Bob Armstrong Wrestling 2 is my 2 favorite people in the world. They were Ricky Steamboat would oversell.
Yes, I've seen this. Yeah, I've seen it.
You guys know Ric Flair would put on the same match every night. Richard Hood.
That is correct.
Let's see. Rick Brooks is with us. Norman Carr asked this question. How was the dressing room organized during the territory days? Where and how did the wrestlers meet to receive the finishes? I think maybe we told this story, but Charlie, I'll let you tell how that happened. I think we lost his
microphone. Your microphone's gone there, Charlie.
Yeah, your microphone is off, Charlie. I will tell Rodney, go ahead and tell them how they got the finishes.
uh, Basically, one normally the referee would go from one, or some other person would go
Can you
from one
guys hear
dresser to
me?
the other.
Yep,
Yeah, we can hear you.
I can't hear you for some reason. I'm gonna hit leave and come back in. Is that okay?
okay,
I'll be
that's
fine.
fine.
But yeah, it was normally, sometimes I would do it. I would go from one dressing to the other, but there was always normally the referees normally carried it from one side to the next.
Michael, gotta love Harley Race. We will ask Charlie when he comes back how did Fuller come to hiring Rick Stewart, because I don't know. Norman Card, write it down. There should have been a book about Memphis territory, 70s and 80s. Rodney's favorite wrestler, Kevin Sullivan, for Mickey Mayfield. Fellas, the fans look more like wrestlers than the wrestlers at these independent shows. Michael Barr, I'm here on YouTube. I was on Facebook. Let's see. Michael Barr, well, my questions supposed to get answered. Yeah, everything comes in. Everything comes in on both things. Well, at least I believe they do. I haven't seen one for anything else yet. Facebook. Brad Armstrong go to the ring. He was an excellent worker. He was tremendous.
It's awesome.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm one of the many huge fans of Southeastern Continental Championship. Ronnie West and Charlie Platt were the best in the territory. Michael Barr. Thank you, Michael. So we certainly do appreciate it, and I'm pretty sure Charlie does as well. Now, Charlie may not get back on because sometimes when you get off, it's hard to get back on. Don't forget about Pork Chop Cash.
No, that pork chop was, oh my goodness, tremendous shape, tremendously gifted wrestler for sure, and he had a mind for it. Let me tell you, he could put together a match depending on, no matter what position he held. He knew exactly what to do. He came to Kansas City, and you talk about, he could stir a crowd up better than I'd ever seen in quite some time. And boy, those crowds were needing to be stirred up there. Boy, they were some out of the talent up there in Kansas City. We had Sam Houston was pretty good, but the rest of them, yeah, they were not too good. But Pork Chop really stood out. He and Rufus R. Jones really stood out up there.
You know, and Pork Chop tried to get me in shape while I was there. He about killed me almost every day. Jeez, Pork Chop.
Yeah, tremendous mind for wrestling.
Michael Barr, as a commentator there at Charlie on TV, you made it easy for the fans to get so to in the ring matches, then go to different places where wrestling was actually at. Charlie was great at that. Michael Barr said that that morning show you were talking about, Charlie, I got up several mornings and watched it. You had Jerry Stubbs and Bob Armstrong on one morning. Michael Barr, Austin who? Christopher Hughes, even the guy, sorry I'm late, working hard. Hope y'all are well. Austin was a jerk. Yes, he was. Probably still is. Dr. Phil Bogress. Let's see. Norman Carr, Kevin Sullivan could not have been that bad. Ooh. He wasn't until he turned heel. I don't know what happened. He oversold. I think that was probably his problem. He tried to oversell.
Yep.
Tried to get baby faces over too much. And
well, same thing with Mark Lewin. Mark Lewin was just fine until he turned. And when he turned, it was, he was laying with the leopards as well.
Thank you, Mr.
Talking
Platt.
to the lady with the third eye.
Christopher Hughes, thank you, Mr. Platt, for all you have done and went through to entertain us. I know there is a lot of people that have forgotten, but there's a lot of us that never will. And that's what we're trying to do here. We are working on something where we can't get, I want you to know, we can't get no footage. Everybody get a little mad at you, but we're thinking about doing something to where we recreate some of that and just recreate some major deals. That's what we're looking to do since we can't, we certainly can't get the original footage. Nobody will let us have it. Richard Hood, Charlie, the angle between you and Bob Armstrong was legendary. If you've not seen it, I think it's available on YouTube. It's great. Mickey Mainfield, I missed the WTCG studios. Yeah, I thought those studios was better than WTBS's. I hope you come back again soon. I had to work late and miss some great stuff. I can watch it, but it's not the same. Michael Barr, back in the day here in Southeastern Continental, many of the fans were peanut farmers, which this part of the country is known for, made the arena shows what they were. From Michael Barr. Being the hill is awesome. So much freedom. You can push the envelope, you can screw up and make a butt of yourself, and it's really no big deal. Hey, I do that every day, and Rodney's the hill. Oh, sorry, Rodney. Christopher, I'm not just blowing smoke, Mr. Platt. I enjoyed last Russell, but I enjoyed your product better, and you and Gordon together, forget about it. Mako, what's causing all this? I'm upset over being late. I couldn't get away. You know how work is. Rick Brooks, you remember the Hells Angels, Chris Colt and Ron Dupree being in the Gulf Coast territory. I'm pretty sure he would remember them because Chris Colt was a memorable character. I remember the name when Bob Armstrong kept wanting to be a tag partner with Ron Fuller. It took 6 weeks before Ron Fuller said on TV that Bob was his partner. The fans went wild. And remember, Ron Fuller turned on Bob Armstrong soon after.
He sure did.
Michael Barr. Dick Dunn versus Leon Baxter, the wrestling pro. Great kayfabe wrestling. Greg Peterson, the California hippie, the Blue Yankees, Eddie Sullivan, Ricky Gibson. So much talent. Michael Barr, Spuckton Monroe. Such a great person, evidently. I never met him, but evidently was a tremendous person. Christopher Hughes, I don't watch today's product. They have lost the art of storytelling, the art of selling, the art of getting over and getting their opponents over. They can't build any characters to believe in.
That's true. It's absolutely true.
Great show here tonight. Thanks, Charlie, Brent, Rodney. Thank you, Michael. He said, Dr. Bill Price, I think he's talking about his buzzers.
Buzzers, yeah.
You're right. I get crapped on a lot, Doctor. Let's see. Fellas, you guys are talking about comments that people made in wrestling. Yes. Let's see. Christopher Hughes. We always use the refs to bring the finishes. Let's see. Prayers all, if you will. My surgery is coming up next Monday, February 27th. Hope it's okay to put this on here. No problem, Michael. We will be praying for you and hope everything goes out there. And Mike Jernigan said, thanks for posting my questions. We appreciate Charlie coming on. As we tell you, sometimes when you have problems, you can't get back on.
Yeah.
We've all had that problem. Thank you, Charlie. If you're watching us on the Facebook feed, thank you so much, on the YouTube feed. Thank you so much. We certainly do appreciate him coming on, and we will have Charlie Platt back on because we love Charlie. He is family. We look at Charlie just like we do our family members. He is part of our family. Rodney, anything we need to talk about before we leave?
I believe we've got her all done up. I know that everybody was excited that Keith Lee returned and had a new hairstyle. And I know everybody was very excited about that.
I did. I will tell you, I'll end this still saying I watched part of the Elimination Chamber. Love Edge's match. Thought it was tremendous. And then it went downhill after that. I just could not watch any more of that stuff. Next week, I'll tell you what we're going to do next week. We're going to talk. It's Black History Month, and we're going to talk. We're going to talk about people: Thunderbolt Patterson, Bobo Brazil, Tony Atlas, Rufus R. Jones, Pork Chop Cash, so many others. Next week,
you can't leave out my favorite of all time, Bearcat Brown.
Bearcat Brown, so many, and we'll talk about them next week right here on Pro Wrestling Inside Out. Jack Lord will be back with us next week. He had some problems today that he couldn't get on, but he will be back with us next week as we continue our look at professional wrestling history. Thank you so much, and we'll see everybody next week right here on Pro Wrestling Inside Out.